right? And so therefore the Gemara is giving that as a raya that we're talking about the carbon after your makdishit, and whatever occurs, you go to Yerushalayim or you're makdishit in Yerushalayim, and then you do the leaning on it, and then you do the shechting of it, and you capture the blood, and you walk with the blood, and you spritz the blood. All that time frame, that piece of meat that animal is inedible. So if I'm saying I want to make this hamburger like shlamim before the zrika occurs, then I'm ussering on something that was made usser by someone's verbal declaration, and it would be chol. It would be a valid neder, and I would not be able to eat the hamburger. So Omele Rav Huna Bereda Rav Nasan B'Neiser Shel Oila. Let's say the Mishnah is talking about a Neiser of an Ola. So an Ola is never edible. An Oila gets completely burned. Theoretically, if I did not completely burn the whole Oila, I left over one leg, and now it's the next morning, that would be sort of noser, because I did not do what I was supposed to do with that korban in the time frame I was supposed to act. But that noser does not affect the edibility. It was never edible. So that should be perfectly good case of where someone took an edible animal and made it into an oila. So I should be able to say this hamburger is like noiser of an oila. The word noiser adds no meaning there, so that should be a valid neder. That's what the suggestion is. So Omerle, so Rava answers back to Rav Huna, but if you're going to say that, then Bird just said the word oila is meaningless there. Imkain lisnei basar oila. Leave out the word nicer and say we're talking about the flesh of an ola, which becomes impermissible and never gains permissibility, so there's no ambiguity. So Rav Huna says, we're talking about a stylistic issue. Loma boy ka'omer. The Mishnah is using a loma boy structure. I can say this because it's not necessary to say that. Okay, loma boy basar oila. I don't have to say the meat of an oila. The usur, that's usur the minute the person makes his makdish. Okay, the korban ko maspis, because this is the man making this neder, is associating the hamburger in front of him with the meat of an ola, which was made usher by someone being makdish. So it's a good neder. No seru pigel the oila, it's richa. But you have to come up with a formula that also includes pigel and noiser from an ola, because Talkadaita Chamina, I might have thought, Ke'iser noiser, Ke'iser pigel, that the object is now forbidden by the Torah. V'havele kemaspis v'davar ha'osur. And so I would make my own understanding. I would say, since noiser is forbidden by the Torah, the noiser of an oila, there's a new iser here. When I was makdish it became an oila by my word. But once the meat was not completely burned on the Mizbeach, it became usher from the Torah. So I might want to argue that I can still eat the hamburger, that the neder was not valid. Kamash malon. Okay, I'm the must be bedavar ha'asur, from something forbidden in the Torah, v'lo misaser, and therefore it's not forbidden by my statement. Kamash malon it is. Okay, so that's why the Mishnah brought those two terms. So Meisfei, I want to argue with that. Ezohu Iser ha'omer b'Torah. What do we mean by an Iser mentioned in the Torah? Now, this is going to get a little complicated. A person who is an onain, a person whose parent just passed away, okay, also his brother, but a parent passed away. Until you bury that person, you're an onain. You're not allowed to die. You're not allowed to do a bunch of stuff. And among the restrictions for an onain is meat and wine. So now we're going to have the following case. Somebody's father dies on Sunday, the 2nd of Nisan. Okay. And at some future date, the first Sunday in Nisan, which may not be the 2nd, the guy says, I'm making a neder that the restriction of not eating meat and drinking wine that was whole when my father died and I was an onain should be applicable today because it's the first Sunday in Nisan and he died on the first Sunday in Nisan. So that's a case where the restriction is mandated by the Torah. Nobody said, oh, gee, my father died as a commemoration. I won't eat meat or drink wine. Nobody did that. The Torah told you not. So it shouldn't be a decent neder. That's the thought here. Meisvei, we're challenging the notion that you use that a neder is because you attach it to something that was made usher, but you think of it in terms of its mutter because it's like after this Rika or for some other reason. Ezohu Isa ha'omer b'Torah. What would be an example of a prohibition mentioned in the Torah, and how can you make a neder linking to it? Omer, you might say, Hareini shelo oichel basar v'shelo yishta yayin kayom shemeis bo aviv. I won't eat meat or drink wine today like I couldn't the day my father died. Kayom shemeis bo rabo, or the day my rabbi died. Kayom shenahareg bo Gedalia ben Achikam, or the day that Gedalia died, was killed. So that's some Gedalia, and obviously you can't eat meat or drink wine. You can't eat anything else either. Kiyom Shura Isi Rishalayim Bechorbono, or the day that I make my first trip to Israel and I first see the city of Jerusalem in a state of destruction. So you have to tear Kriya and treat it as a day of mourning. So if I say any of those things, the Gemara's Havamin is it's valid. Okay, even though the problem we just mentioned. Omer Shmuel says, "Hu shenoder b'yaiso hayoim." That only works if the first day time, if when your parent actually died was the 2nd of Nisan, a Sunday, and the next year, for some personal reason, instead of saying I'm going to make the 2nd of Nisan my father's yahrzeit and avoid meat and wine, you say, I'm going to treat the first Sunday in Nisan, whenever it occurs, as my yahrzeit in quotation marks, and avoid meat and wine. So if the 2nd year you make this neder, the first year of the 2nd yard, whatever, you got, am I clear? So the guy dies in the 2nd of Nisan. Next year, the first Sunday of Nisan is the 3rd of Nisan. You say, today is to me like the day my dad died, and I'm not eating meat and wine. So now you would have been able to eat meat and wine that day because it wasn't the day your father died, but you made a neder. So now in a subsequent year, you can make a neder based on the 2nd year neder. Where you did it, it wasn't done by the Torah. That's Shmuel's comment. So Hechidami. So what would the case be? Lav kegon B'chad b'Shabbos umeis ba'aviho. It is the guy is there on the first Sunday of the month that his father died. And he says, let today be like the first of Nisan last year when my father died. V'afal gaf de'ikatuva chad b'Shabbos dehetera. Since Nisan has 4 or 5 Sundays in it that are perfectly mutter, Katani Usser, I made this first of Nisan Sunday Usser based on a valid neder. Shmamina be'iker hu demaspis. So we try to use this case as the raya going back to the previous case of the Shlomim, that what we're talking about is the Iker days of the Shlamim, which means from the day that you were Makdish it until several days, possibly later, could be 6 months later, that a Kohen spritzes the dam. So by using this case of the Sundays in Nisan, I added the Nisan, that you're going back and you're proving up before that we're talking about when the food stuff was still in a status of Easter based on a neder. And okay. But what about Shmuel's explanation? So now we're going to actually quote Shmuel. Omar Shmuel, hu shenider ubo me oso hayom v'yelech. Shmuel's, we had this a little bit different wording now. Shmuel is saying that on that first yard site Sunday, you say this Sunday and all future Sundays that are the first Sunday in Nisan, I'm not going to eat meat or drink wine in commemoration of my father's demise. So now the vow is valid because even though you're saying that first Sunday, you're referring to the very first, the Dead Day Sunday, where it was Minat Torah. Okay, that seems to be what Shmuel is trying to say. So Amar Ravina Taishma, let's look into this. Now we're going to jump to a totally different discussion. Everybody knows that you have to take challah from bread. And everybody knows you have to take truma from a field of grain once it's harvested, obviously. Okay? So there is a pasuk that tells that there's a mishnah that tells us kachalas aaron or ketrumaso mutter. If I eat, I make the following neder. I am going to treat this loaf of bread I have in front of me like the challah of Aaron or his truma. So those are forbidden to me from the Torah. So I should have said nothing, right? Because the rule was if a person can usher it, then I can make a neder like that. But if it's ushered by the Torah, I can't. So I want to pick those cases, and I want to say, kachalas aaron o ketrumaso. I'm making this loaf of bread like the challah of Aaron, or like the truma that is taken for Aaron, meaning for kahanim. Okay, mutter. It's not a valid neder. It's perfectly edible. Oh, ketruma lalachme taida. And since we said there, the challah of Aaron or the truma of Aaron, we didn't say anything that's usher to a kohen. We limited it to those two. The implication is that if I can dig up another kind of truma that goes to kahanim, I would be able to make an oath on that. In other words, since it's limited to these two, I can infer that if I can expand the list, it would be okay to make a neder on something else. Is that clear? Okay. So, ha ketrumas lachmi taida. And I do have another example. There's the truma when you bring a toida, along with the toida, there are 40 loaves of bread. Okay, 10 are chulin. I mean, 10 are chometz. 10 are quote regular unquote matzah. 10 are fried matzah, like pancakes that you fry in a frying pan. And 10 are like bagels. You boil it first and then you bake it. And of those 4 sets of 10 mincha products, one of each is taken as truma. Now let's look at the sequence. Remember, we just said that would be a valid neder. But let's look at the sequence. The sequence is you do these minchas after the zrika of the toida. So this is a proof that we're talking about after the zrika, which ruins our notion that the ola is a proof that it's before the zrika. Okay? Vaha trumas velachme toida la'achas rikas damimhu. But that comes after. It's disproving what you're trying to prove. So ema ketrumas halishka. So maybe we're talking about the trumas halishka. These are the machzis hashekel. Everybody kicks in. They go in a special bunch of cabinets, and the kahanim, the lishka doles this money out to buy korbanei tzibur. So it was perfectly good money. It was in Ruvain's pocket, and he gave it. He was makdish it by giving it as his chatzi shekel, and now it has kedusha. And there is no period of permissibility. It stays in the lishka until it's spent on a korban. So there is no time. You can't go and redeem those coins. There is no possibility of it ever being usable. So this is proof again that we're talking about before Zrika, during the impermissibility time frame. Aval truma slachme toida mai. So if you say this hamburger is like the truma of a lachme toida, what would be the halacha? So the first shot is mutter. You should be able to eat it because that bread is after the zrika and people eat it. So the Gemara says, Lisnei chame toida, then the Mishnah should have said that. Why did the Mishnah not? Why do we have to infer it? The Mishnah should have said that. So here, kol shechein trumas. So, and how much more so if we say this hamburger is like the truma for Aaron, for a Kohen, I should be able to eat it. Because if and then the English here says, because if the truma was prohibited by an eder, it cannot serve as the source item through association. So therefore, if God himself made the truma usher to you, you shouldn't be able to make a neder based on that. So now the Gemara is going to answer, ha kamashmalan. So we have to determine from this, we have to understand from this, trumas lachme toida trumasohi, that the truma of these 40 loaves of bread are not really any different than other trumos that Aaron gets. Okay, and therefore it would not be a valid neder. But we're going to come up with a new case, okay? And this is going to be a little bit strange because we're going to set up a case where we did the taking of the truma from the lachme toida before the zrika, and it's fine. So it's during the impermissibility period. This was regular grain that somebody was makdish. Now it's impermissible, and we do the trumas aron then. So it would be a valid neder. I know it's a little complicated, but you got to hold cup. A boy, Sama, you could say trumas lachme toida nami kodim zrikas damimhu. We managed to take the Trumas Lachme Toida before we did the Zrika of the animal. In other words, we went out of sequence, but it's perfectly valid. Why? Kaidem Zrikas Damim Hu Kegoin, for example, the Afrash Inahu Belisha. We took the truma from the dough prior to cooking or baking it. Okay, so that's before the zrika because you do the baking after the zrika. Okay, so what's going on? V'chiha the Omer of Tuvi bar Kisna Omer Shmuel, and this would work out according to an unusual circumstance set up by Rav Tuvi bar Kisna. Lachmi told the afa on the arbachalais. What if instead of there is a requisite amount of dough, and you know there's a required shear, and I'm supposed to have 10 required shiurim of fermented bread, 10 required shiurim of matzah, 10 of fried matzah, and 10 of parboiled matzah. Okay, so what happens if I made a huge amount of dough that was 10 times the shear? Okay, and I baked it as one big, humongous challah like they have at chasanis. Okay, and then I made one humongous matzah and one humongous pancake and one humongous boiled and baked food product. What would be the rule now? How do I take the truma from that? That's going to be the question. Okay, yotza, according to Rav Tovi. That's good. You can do that. So the Gemara says, v'haksiv arbayim. But just a minute, the Torah went out of its way to tell us you have to have 10, 10, 10, and 10. My math says that's 40. So the Gemara says, lemitzvah. All the Torah is telling you there is what the mitzvah is, but it's not la'akev. The right way to do it is 40 loaves. But if you made 10 loaves and managed to take truma from it legitimately, it would not be ma'akev. It could be valid. That's what he's saying here. Okay? So, vaho boy, le mishkal truma. But how do you measure the 1/10 for truma if it's one humongous loaf? The Gemara wonders. V'chi tema demashkil chada ripsa al kula. Just as I can give more truma if I want from my grain pile, it doesn't have to be an exact amount. It could be a little less, could be a little more. Maybe I want to give a little more and give the chumetz loaf as 1/4, 1/20, 1/4. Maybe that's how I give the truma. If 1/10 is good, halachs kama v'kama, giving 1/4 should be good. So v'hatanan, but we already learned echad mikol korban. You have to take one from each of these minchas. So that means you have to manage to take some truma from the risen bread, and truma from the matzah, and truma from the fried matzah, and truma from the parboiled matzah. So how do you do that? Shelo yito make korban al chavero, and you can't take one of those four and call that truma for all four. It only can take for itself. So the Gemara says, "V'chi tema shakel prusa mikol chad v'chad." So it's pretty simple. Put the thing on a scale, find out its weight, do math in your mind, cut off exactly 1/10 or maybe a tiny bit more, and that'll be the truma. That's a Havamina here. Vatanan, we have a Mishnah that uses the word echad. It has to be one complete element. It can't be shalo yitul prusa. You can't take a chunk. You have to take a loaf. So how am I going to do it? So by process of elimination, there's only one way you could do it. Ella, here's how you do it. Ta'afreshinahu belisha. You take the big bowl of dough, separate it into 10 portions, and make 10 balls of dough. Take one of them out as your truma, and then smush all the remaining 9 back together, or make a braided challah with it, whatever, and bake it now. So now you wind up with one huge loaf of each of the 4 kinds, and you've taken a legitimate truma from each one prior to baking it. Then you bake the truma separately. So here we have a case where we figured out a way to take truma from the lachmei toda before the zrika. And it was designated as lachmei toda by somebody. So it should be a chol as a valid neder. That's where we're up to. Okay, and we'll just wrap that up. V'shokol chada me chometz. You take one of the unbaked loaves from the chometz bread. V'chada min hachalos, and one from the matzah breads. V'chada min harakikim, one from the fried wafers. V'chada min haravuva, and one from the boiled and baked. Okay, so now each of these new truma dough products, you can bake them and you can give them to a Kohen, and a Kohen got his truma, and everything is copacetic. Okay, so now the Gemara wonders, if that's the case, and we now don't have absolute proof either way, lema katanoi. Let's say this whole business is not from the Amarayim, it goes all the way back to the Tanayim. And here is a new case, okay? If you are and in the business of animal husbandry, and you produce your cow or your sheep or whatever it is, has its first calf or its first lamb, and it happens to be a male. So that has Kedusha. But nobody was makdish it. It automatically has Kedusha the minute it comes out of the womb of the mother. So if I say this hamburger is like Bob's Bechor, is that a valid vow or not? Okay? Because it was made Kodesh by the Rabbon Shalom. It wasn't made Kodesh by Bob. He had no brayer in the matter. Okay, he can let it wander around till it gets a mum. I mean, there are things you can do. But the point is, it was made Kodesh by the Rabbon Shalom. Harei alai bechor. This hamburger is like a bechor in my, as far as I'm concerned. Rabbi Yaakov says that the meat that it's a valid vow and you can't eat the hamburger. Rabbi Yehuda matir, but Rabbi Yehuda says it was made usher by God, not by man, and it's not a valid neder. Okay, v'achidami. So what are we talking about? If I say explicitly, this hamburger is like Bob's Bechor before it's shechted and the blood is thrown, okay? My time of the mandashori. What would be the rationale of the one who repeats it? Before the zrika, it's automatically kodesh and it's inedible. And I'm saying I'm going to make my hamburger inedible. Okay? And now I understand, but God did it. That's the other view. If I say this is like Bob's Bechor after the Kohen shechted it and threw the blood, etc., my timer demand oyster. So what's the rationale of the one that says it's an eder and it's usser? Because now it's edible. And not only that, but it's even better than other korbanos because there's no restriction on what the Kohen does with it. He could sell it. He could give it away. He could invite us all to a big party in the daf room with it. That was a knock, in case anybody didn't get it. Okay, the ila. Okay, my time at the manda oiser. Elalav. So what do we have to be talking about? We have to be talking about the mochis basar bechor. It's after the fact. Bob took his bechor to Yerushalayim. It was shechted. A Kohen caught the blood, walked with the blood, spritzed the blood. Bob got a butcher to chop the bechor up into various cuts of meat. Bob cooked the meat and invited me to the party to eat that meat. Now that meat is sitting on a plate in front of me. Okay, my Bechor lamb chop is sitting on a plate in front of me. And there's another lamb chop over here that's not a Bechor lamb chop. So I say the second lamb chop to me is like the Bechor lamb chop. So what do I mean? Do I mean that the whole time from when it was born until they got around to shechting and spritzing and cooking, that it was usher? Or do I mean, well, right now it's mutter? Because I didn't specify. I just said this is like this. Okay, so now I have the kasha again. Right? Okay. So the machis basar bechor, I have meat from a bechor sitting there. Umachis basar the haich gabe, and I have another lamb chop nearby. Okay, v'yomer, and what I say is zeh kazeh. Lamb chop 2 is like lamb chop 1, but I didn't specify. V'tanaihi, and that is the machloikes between Reb Yaakov and Reb Yehuda. Okay, so Reb Yaakov now says it's forbidden because but now it's mutter. So he did do something himself to change its status. And I'm specifying that the new lamb chop is like the old lamb chop. But in my mind, I mean, I don't want to eat it. So Reb Yaakov says I can't eat it. But Reb Yehuda says, what are you talking about? Look at what's happening. You're saying this lamb chop is like this lamb chop, and this lamb chop was just given to you with a little A1 sauce and a knife and a fork. And please eat it. So what I'm doing is I'm saying nobody else can take that lamb chop. I want seconds. Okay, it's not a bechor. I'm not fussy. I'll eat regular lamb chops. And we'll tune in tomorrow for the resolution.
Pork or pork?
Huh? A fork, not pork. Oh, it's a pay and a pay. I hear you. Okay, this was somewhat complicated. I hope I explained it relatively clearly. If I didn't, it's because I don't really understand it either. But in any event, Bob, when is he making the party?
As soon as I get the lamb chop.
Okay.
Back in the library for a word back.
I have no idea.
Well, we're going to be in here tomorrow.
I have no idea. We're going to do what David says because David is the supreme boss.
This is yours? Yes, thank you.
Oh,
I was